This is Live from my office, a highly rated podcast, so highly rated, there's not another podcast that comes out of my office that's rated higher. Huh? Yeah. I don't care if you're on Apple or, your iHeart situation or, anywhere else you get your podcasts. Your Spotify. Anywhere. You're going to get your podcast, any platform that's out there, you can find Live from my office. And obviously you have. So I'm kind of beating a dead horse, a dead podcast horse, if you will. There is no dead horse to be interviewed, so instead of that, we're going with Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh, the former congressman, former radio talk show host, author, speaker, and podcaster himself, will join me to give you the ins and outs of Congress 2023 and the clown show that it is. And by the way, speaking of clown shows, I've got a bad case of coulrophobia. Coulrophobia. You know what coulrophobia is? Fear of clowns. So are you afraid of Kevin McCarthy? Are you afraid of AOC? Are you afraid of the far right and the far left because they're crazy? Yep, me too. You have coulrophobia. We'll just slap it on Congress instead. We'll get into everything Joe Walsh knows about Congress because there's a lot of stuff in here that we don't, including me, and I pay a lot of attention to this, but yeah, I don't know some of the things that we talked about until he talked about them to me. We'll talk about our relationship, Joe's and mine, and go over some very specific names. We'll name names and talk about the personalities in Congress and whether or not we have any hope for America whatsoever. So stand by for all of that. Wherever you listen, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell about 10 or 20 of your friends to do the same. And don't forget, you get the Steve Cochran Show on the radio every morning. Not just on the radio, also on every smart device you can think of, including your Alexa. And you can stream it. There's a million ways to get the content we provide at the Steve Cochran Show. And I hope you will. But it's 5:30 to 9 every weekday morning, Central Time, Chicago time, on WLS, the Big 890 AM in Chicago, and wherever you stream or listen as well. All right, so I'm going to go take something from my coulrophobia. In the meantime, we want to thank ROW, the ROW Center for the Arts specifically. And we'll do that in just a moment. They're sponsoring the podcast today. And then we'll come back and talk to Joe Walsh. I thank you for listening to Live from my office. The Rouse Center for the Arts is where we have done the New Year's Eve show for so many years, including this past New Year's Eve, and a pretty good chance we're going to be back there for New Year's Eve 2023-2024. And the Rouse Center for the Arts has all sorts of entertainment options for you. It's one of the great theaters in the country. And you're going, well, it's in Crystal Lake. That's a bit of a drive. Oh, it's worth the drive. And certainly if you live in the north or northwestern suburbs of Chicago, or if you're in southern Wisconsin, I don't know why you wouldn't come to the Rouse Center, because there's all sorts of cool stuff going on, including a great venue for stand-up comedy. It's called Lucy's, and once a month they put on a stand-up comedy show that's as good or better than any in the Midwest. On January 20th, you can see Tim Walco, the great Tim Walco, been doing stand-up all over the country as a headliner forever, and Tim Benker in a themed Tim show. That's at 8:30 on January 20th. March 10th, Calvin Evans is in town, and the very funny Mike Preston will host that. Calvin was just doing Kevin Hart's stand-up show, and on it goes. You can check out the Lucy's lineup, and also if you like improv, Saturday night the 21st, right after that stand-up show at Lucy's on the 20th, the Green Room Improv is back. And there's monthly Green Room Improv shows as well. So plenty to choose from. Go to RAUCenter.org, RAUE Center.org. See all the great things that are happening. And if you've always wanted to be a stand-up comic, our own John DeCosse is teaching stand-up comedy at the Rouse School for Performance starting in March. You sign up now, you might even be a guest speaker. So that's a stand-up comedy class with John DeCosse. You can go in, you can, so many times you're not able to do this, but in John's case, you can point at him and laugh because that's part of the curriculum. He'd love to see you and information on that stand-up comedy class and all the classes they offer, along with information on the Lucy's shows and the Green Room Improv. Go to RAUCenter.org, and thank you, Rouse Center, for sponsoring Live from my office. This is Live from my office, and it is a pleasure to say welcome to my friend, Joe Walsh. Good morning, Congressman, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when people are listening.
Hey, Steve, I mean this, no bullshit. You're one of my favorite people. It's great to be with you.
You know, it's funny, too, because we talk about when you and I met at WIND.
Yeah.
You didn't know what to make of me. I thought you were the Tea Party nut. There was a little truth in both of those, by the way. But, you know, I got it, and I think you got it right away. I think, you know, people, you roll your eyes all you want, people. I think at this point in our lives, we're both trying to do a little bit of good and a little less bad.
I didn't, because my background was politics and you were the radio guy. What I didn't like about you was I didn't think you believed anything. I just thought you were a radio talker. And then I came to believe after listening to you, after I got to know you, that you do believe things, but you're kind of in that weird place where you're kind of in the middle, Steve Cochran.
Well, but you know what? Honestly, and I believe this, and I know you don't agree with this, but I believe most of America psychologically is in the middle. They're just tired of the shit. They're tired of the people on the right screaming. They're tired of the people on the left screaming and nothing getting done. The question is, how do you motivate the middle to show up for primaries, do what they need to do to actually have something that moves the ball? Because here's a bulletin. The two-party system doesn't appear to be working.
Yeah, you know, everybody says that, Steve, and I guess I kind of sort of agree with you. But let me ask you a question. If CNN hired you and I to do a primetime show where every night we have people on and we have respectful conversations about issues from both sides, kind of right down the middle, trying to find common ground, would a fucking show like that have any ratings?
Well, here's where I do get a little bit of Disneyland about that. I believe if you have two people like you and I, by the way, CNN, if you're listening, consider this a pitch. But two people who can entertain and inform, as opposed to a couple of just journalists who decided now they want to be on TV. God bless them, but you're not all that good. But people who know how to entertain, inform, get an audience, and keep an audience. I think there is a thirst for that. That you don't need people screaming at each other, and you don't need people. And I'm talking. Listen, we're talking about like everything else now. It's a fraction of the audience, but you would get people, and you would be able to build over time people as well. And the dirty little secret here is advertisers are looking for that. Advertisers on a national level want stuff where they're not going to get canceled and they're not going to get thrown out. And if you're on a truly moderate show with a balanced viewpoint, then you got a place for advertisers to go.
It makes sense, but then, Steve, I keep racking my head. Why hasn't CNN done that, or why hasn't MSNBC or Fox would never? You remember the old, what was it? The old Crossfire or the old Hannity Combs?
Well, yeah,
Hannity's such a fucking idiot.
Hannity Combs was just Hannity beating up on Combs, right?
Exactly.
And you were the go-to guy for MSNBC when you were in Congress because you were the crazy Republican, and they could go, ooh, look what they do. It was like you were in the zoo. So no, I think it's a different show, and the reason it hasn't been done is because you have to have someone in charge who has the balls to do it. There's a guy named Rick Kaplan who ran CNN and MSNBC, and I did some work at CNN for him. And he's the only guy I think ever to run two major news networks, and he was a huge deal at ABC, and he goes all the way back to Cronkite. But he started Nightline. I mean, you know, he knows from it.
Yeah.
He's a guy that would take that kind of chance. I don't think there's anybody out there now who would. And the amazing thing is you get guys who just, they wring their hands and they go, I don't know what we're going to do. You know, we don't want people yelling at each other. Let's put on another show where people yell at each other. It's just idiotic.
You're still in radio. I'm no longer in radio. You were in radio for a lot longer than I have. Has talk radio changed?
Yeah, 100%.
Vis-a-vis this kind of issue. It's not, you couldn't make it. Well, you are making it. You're like one of those few rare fucking voices in talk radio that really will take all sides and listen to all sides.
Well, but I don't handle foolishness the way I used to. I mean, if you call up and you start screaming at me about vaccines or killing 20-year-olds, and Fauci at the age of 80 decided he was going to go through some giant conspiracy with the Chinese government and finally make some real money when he's been knocking down $500,000 a year for a few years. at 80. I mean, it's just nonsense.
How do you handle a caller like that? Would you let him go off?
I'd let him say what they're going to say, and depending on my lack of sleep and mood, I'll either cut it off quickly or I'll say, I want you to take a break. I want you to actually go on the internet outside of the places you normally go and take a look at the science behind it. Get off your Facebook feed and actually have some faith in something other than Fox News. And by the way, that's not even fair to Fox News. Fox News doesn't do that. Fox News doesn't go on the air. They love playing the games with Hannity. Hannity's a dick. He's a guy that sold out a long time ago.
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker makes Hannity look rational.
Yeah.
So those people are dangerous because they spur the lunatic fringe on. But the lunatic fringe on the right and on the left, and you know this, it's a small fraction of the true story. Most people would never, ever be involved in shows like that. It's the squeaky wheel. The loud gets the attention. And, if we turn off our TikTok feed for 10 minutes in this country and show up to vote in a primary, maybe you can change something. I don't know that it's going to happen in our lifetime, though.
Well, and you may disagree with me, and I apologize for the clumsy analogy. But in all the polling they did, like on Islamic terrorists back in the day, as you know, Steve, a very minute minority of Muslims around the world were actually terrorists.
Sure.
But there was actually a large cohort of Muslims who, though they would never engage in acts of terrorism, understood with, sympathized with, and privately rooted on what terrorists were doing. My fear with the crazy lunatic fringe is that there is still a large number of people on the right and conservatives and Republicans who, though they would never sound like Marjorie Taylor Greene, they sympathize with her or look the other way. And I think those people are just as dangerous. Like everybody always asks me, and I always say publicly, I think Paul Ryan, I think a hell of a lot less of a guy like Paul Ryan than I do Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a true believer. She believes this shit. Paul Ryan is a fucking coward.
Yeah, he's an opportunist. He ran away and hid, and now that he sees Trump is sliding, he's against Trump. Grow up.
But my point is, in the Republican caucus and conference, there are a lot more Paul Ryans than Marjorie Taylor Greenes.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I want to discuss with you when we get done in bonus Joe time, because high school for old people is Congress. Congress is high school for old people. There's the cliques and the groups, and you lived it. You lived it. You were there. You know that institution. You stay in touch with folks. You talk about it all the time. You're on CNN. You're on MSNBC. I don't know. Are you persona non grata on Fox now?
They blackballed me 5 years ago, and I haven't been back on. The minute, Steve, that I publicly came out against Trump, I was told by producers there who loved me, no can do, Joe. We're done. It sucks.
Because you suddenly, so somewhere in the Fox newsroom, there's a picture of you with a circle and a slash through it, like nobody can do.
One producer told me 5 years ago that their model is they can only have Democrats on who oppose Trump. They can't have Republicans or conservatives on who oppose Trump. They just can't do it.
It's amazing. Yeah. And again, it's a small percentage of those folks that actually watch Fox every night, or watch CNN every night, or watch MSNBC. And by the way, MSNBC doesn't get off the hook here. They're doing nothing to move the ball. MSNBC will put on folks like what's her name, Joy Reid. Who is radical and disinterested in doing any good than anybody. Some of the cliches, the beer commercial stuff is true, right? Everything's not free. Oh, yeah. Hello, Democrats. Everything's not free. But then the scary thing that I've seen in changing in Republicans, because that's the way I grew up. I grew up around all Republicans. I've always leaned that way until the last few years. And I've never seen Republicans more afraid of their own shadow. It's all about fear. They're coming to take our jobs. They're coming to take our guns. They're coming to take our daughters. It's just nonsense. And when this came up this week, specifically in regards to the assault weapons ban in Illinois, I said, this isn't about anything other than politics, but it does possibly limit the carnage. So before the crazy with the gun gets to reload, maybe the cops can get there and do something. And how is that? How's that a hindrance to you, gun owner?
Well, that's actually a great issue because you and I vehemently would disagree on that issue. But broader for everybody listening to us right now, you are still, in my mind, politically, you are an independent and relatively centrist. I'm still that crazy Tea Party guy. I consider myself to be kind of like a real conservative, which is why I'm no longer with the Republican Party. But you and I, Steve, can have like a conversation, even though politically we disagree on a number of things.
Yeah, well, every Democrat is not an insane leftist lunatic looking to go commie tomorrow. Every Republican is not an insane gun-toting, people of color hating fool. But there's some of those on both sides, and the point is.
But I will say, Steve, and you disagree with me if you want. You're right. There's a lunatic fringe on both sides. But I generally believe the far left is just wrong on most shit. I think the far right now, this mega right, I don't think it's like about policy. I think they're fundamentally like anti-truth. They're fundamentally like anti-democracy. They like embrace. You want to know what the far right is now? Just listen to Tucker Carlson every day. I mean, they embrace such conspiratorial crap like you wouldn't believe.
Well, let's talk about him for a second because he is a smart guy. And I knew him back in the bow tie wearing MSNBC days. And he is a smart guy who is the ultimate opportunist. I don't believe he believes 10% of what comes out of his mouth.
I used to think that, and I agree with you generally. I agree with your premise. Hannity is an idiot. He's just a cheerleader. Tucker's a smart guy. But a couple people who know Tucker really well have told me recently that this actually is the Tucker that he's always wanted to be, kind of like this ugly white nationalist authoritarian Putin pounding guy. He's just never really had the courage to put it out. But now he is, and he's being rewarded for it.
Yeah, but with millions and millions of dollars and a continuing chipping away at the sensibility of America every single night. And we've seen it, right? And it all started with Donald J. Trump. No, of course it didn't. It started before that. It started before that, but he was the guy who took the lid off the spam can of stupid in this country, because that's my problem, is people in power now aren't afraid to show just how stupid they are. And stupid is the word. Because if you have a viewpoint, here's the deal. If you and I disagree on something, I know you're educated. I know you believe it. And I know you've done your homework and can back up your view. Marjorie Taylor Greene never read the research papers on Jewish space lasers, because there aren't any, and Donald J. Trump never actually swigged the Clorox himself. I've got a microphone, so I'm going to say anything off the top of my head. I'm going to put it out on social media, and it's going to be out there for the world. That's not a belief. That's just tearing it down.
No. And again, Steve, what's weird is I went to Congress in 2010 in a large degree to tear it down because I was pissed off at both parties, part of the Tea Party wave, but it was always policy driven to me. Like, I was pissed off about how much money we're spending, how much we were borrowing, and all the debt. And I did and said a bunch of stupid things, but I was always driven by that policy desire of mine. The Marjorie Taylor Greenes now of the world in the Republican Party, I don't see any policy basis for this stuff that they say. It's like they just want to fight.
So who's more dangerous, the Marjorie Taylor Greene faction or Kevin McCarthy?
Oh, Kevin, I would put by far Kevin McCarthy, and I would lump them all in there. Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan and all of the Republicans who have decided to turn the other way, to look away the last 6 years and let Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz do their thing. I think the cowards are much more dangerous than the crazies.
And the cowards are not backing down in any way, shape, or form, or are able to look themselves in the mirror. Why? Because they go, well, it wasn't me. Because at the end of the day, they have no character, and they'll be able to say, hey, I didn't do it.
Because you look at me, like Paul Ryan looks at me, and 5 years ago, I stood up publicly on my radio show, and I said, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure Donald Trump never, ever, ever gets reelected.
Right.
And from the moment I did that, I lost everything, the radio show, my livelihood, my future in the Republican Party. The Paul Ryans of the world look at that, and they don't want that to happen. They want to keep their gig in Congress. They want to keep their Fox News gig, their shows. So they don't do that. I get it. I mean, it makes sense. I took a blowtorch to my career. Who the fuck in their right mind would want to do that?
Well, but here's the thing. You still have to live with yourself because in Congress, you're in a position to affect 330 million people in what has always been the greatest country on earth. Is there no conscience that's tied to that with these people?
It's a really good way to put it. No, they don't think that way. Like you said a few minutes ago, it's high school for older people. It really is. When you're in that body, your world becomes that body. And it's a really heady experience, Steve. You and I used to talk about this years ago. You think you're a fucking god. You think you're a king or a queen. And like 2 weeks ago, when they were having that fight on the floor to decide on who their speaker is going to be, the whole world for them was what was going on the floor. They couldn't think outside that building. And so you just get so caught up into it that you lose all perspective.
So that's the inside the Beltway versus outside the Beltway. This is literally inside the hallways and in chambers as opposed to outside.
Well, I remember doing that. I remember in 2011 and 12 being caught up in these, we're going to shut down the government fights, and we're fighting with John Boehner. And I remember having the meetings with my former buddy, Jim Jordan, and all the rest. And you literally think like you are deciding the fate of the world. And you forget about everybody outside the Capitol. It's really scary.
How much of that with most of these folks is about fame and eventual fortune or even more fortune as opposed to the damage they're doing?
Oh, it's all about it. And even like, Steve, when I was in Congress 10 years ago, I wasn't tweeting yet. Twitter really wasn't a big thing yet.
Right. A
mutual buddy of ours, Brian Biggs, introduced me to Twitter when I first got my radio show.
Same here, yeah.
And so now, with all of this social media now, these guys like AOC and Matt Gaetz and Marjorie, they're like free agents, man. They are their own corporations. And the entire purpose is to advance them and their voice. And it's not about the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or passing legislation. You're your own thing. And you've got you want your ratings to go up.
As long as we live in a system where primaries determine who hits the general, and the general is always two, because write-ins aren't getting elected. How do we beat this? Because people, and I put this back on all the people who I believe think more along the lines of the way I do, and there is a solution, and the solution's in the middle. But you have to get off your ass and do something so outlandish. You actually have to vote twice a year. And for people to not do it, is it a lack of understanding of the civic responsibility and what the primary process is?
So there are two solutions. Either you reform the way we vote, and you do things like open primaries or ranked choice voting, or you leave it on to the American people, like what you just said. People got to get off their ass and vote in primaries and then in generals, both. I tend to have always wanted to believe to leave it up to the American people to get off their ass, but that's not happening, and it's getting worse. And so what you're seeing is in states all over the country, people are trying to reform the way we vote so that the most extreme person is not always nominated within each party.
The ranked choice piece of this mathematically, and you're a very smart guy. You don't talk about this much, but you're a highly educated, very smart guy. No matter how much you'd like people to think you're not, you're a smart guy. But the ranked choice piece is hard for folks to understand. And I know they've had success with it as far as an architecture for a system in New York and in California. I don't know that it catches on nationally because I don't know that people get it.
And Steve, I'm fairly educated, and I got to admit, it confuses me. So it's got to confuse the average voter. I tend to agree with what you just said. I don't think it's going to catch on. And look, part of me doesn't want it to, because it should be like this party nominates this person, that party nominates that person. Okay, let's go at it in November and decide. I tend to believe the answer really should be another party, another major party nominates this person, right, so that we have 3 or 4 party choices. I like that route eventually.
Is there a chance, because those that make the rules benefit from the rules, so why would they change the rules? With the state institutions set up the way they are, the Democrats are killing Illinois, the Republicans are eventually killing Texas, and it goes that way around the country. In any country or any state that's specifically a bright red or a bright blue, is there a way to change those rules and change that system, short of some sort of revolution of civic pride and saving America, that we haven't gotten to yet?
So this is the kind of shit I said 8 or 9 years ago that you would have just ripped me on the radio. It's time for we live in a revolutionary period. I'm not saying go.
Well, let me just give you credit. You were ahead of the curve.
Yeah, well, but against me, I would often say that 8 or 9 years ago with inflammatory rhetoric. But I still believe the principle stands. And what I mean by a revolutionary period is this, Steve Cochran. I no longer believe, and I stopped believing when I went in Congress, that the political system can fix itself, that the fix is going to come within the system. I think the only way we change this fucking political system is from a revolution outside, i.e. the people organize and demand change. I think that's the only way this thing fixes. And it may not happen.
Well, that's not going to come from Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang?
No.
No. Yeah, why am I spacing on his name? They started an independent party with some significant names, and they've done nothing with it so far. And they said, well, it's going to take time. Well, here's a bulletin again. We don't have time. So where does it come from? Who moves that ball?
Okay. So I tend to believe that great men and women kind of drive shit. So I tend to believe somebody like Mark Cuban or The Rock or Oprah Winfrey or Tom Hanks, or you pick the name, some big fucking well-known, well-respected person has got to stand up sometime in the next 4 to 6 years and say, that's fucking it. This is broken. I'm gonna run for this, or I'm gonna start this. If you feel like I do, man, sign up, away we go.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you. What about the billionaires? Do they have a responsibility here? And by the way, here's a bulletin to the Democrats and Bernie Sanders. Maybe slow down on the maple syrup, Bernie. It's affecting the way you think. But the fact is, you could tax the billionaires to death. Yeah. You're still not going to come close to scratching the surface on fixing the deficit in this country and the problem. Nope. It just doesn't work that way. The math doesn't work. It's a talking point. But do the billionaires have a responsibility to step up here?
Yes. We all have a civic responsibility. We all have a responsibility to do what we can and give what we can. Billionaires certainly.
Well, not just the money, right? But Bezos has thump. Gates has thump. Bill Gates, kooky as he may or may not be, has done amazing things through his charitable foundation. So those who have been given so much need to give back more than just a little when it comes to politics.
You're right. They're afraid. Think of all the Bill Gateses out there who, if they had put their money into politics to help some of this revolutionary change that we're talking about, the difference that could have been made. But they're afraid. The guys like that are afraid because once you dip your toe in the politic game, man, you get attacked like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, there is that. But again, every time we back up and say, yeah, but, then nothing gets done. You know, you go back to Michael Jordan, who people always question Michael about why he didn't speak out more. And he said, well, you know, Republicans buy sneakers too. And he's not wrong. But Jeff Bezos has a company called Amazon that's not going away tomorrow, and you don't have to like him to buy his stuff and see that it gets to your front door tomorrow. Bill Gates is essentially out of the business. He's got the money he needs. I'm not putting it on them. I'm just saying there's more they can do as well. Yeah, is there a difference in the government that I'm not aware of? Because even though it's operated in a different way and exponentially, the math here goes through the roof, but you still are supposed to have a certain amount of money to pay a certain set of bills, and in the process, you try to make things better for your family, and in this case, makes things better in Congress for the people of this country. That working order, and I guess that's what McCain used to talk about in general, right? We need to establish regular order. That regular order appears to be gone in the House and the Senate.
It was a reform that we screened for 10 years ago, open order, regular order, open voting, where you could literally debate on the floor. You could offer amendments on the floor. You voted on individual bills that weren't stacked with 100 different things. The Republicans who kind of held up McCarthy for a week, this was one of the reforms they demanded. Not all that they demanded was bad. Some of it was really good.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
We do have to get back to, especially in the House, a lot of that open order. And Steve, I agree with Matt Gaetz on this. I'm going to guess you.
By the way, there's a sentence you probably never thought you'd say.
I agree with Matt Gaetz that C-SPAN should be open up those fucking C-SPAN cameras. I want to see the House go at it like this. I mean, I was on the floor a lot where you're debating and you're huddling and you're yelling at each other over pieces of legislation. We should let the American people see the House floor at work.
I agree. And C-SPAN had a huge week, and there should be people who see C-SPAN with regularity to see. And we go, well, you don't want to see how the sausage is made. Yeah, we do, and we need to.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. Agreed. So
let me go backwards here because I'm already keeping you longer than I told you I would. But honestly, what are you doing? In the course of that week, a hero emerged, and it was not somebody from either party. It was a woman named Cheryl Johnson, the clerk. Cheryl Johnson, who had to stand up in the middle of those children on both sides and just watch the nonsense. By the way, Democrats sitting around giggling and, throwing out social media posts, look how effed up they are. Yeah. That doesn't help a thing. And as a matter of fact, it makes everything worse. So they get no break here. But talk about Cheryl Johnson and the clerk and how she didn't murder anyone because she had to have thought of it.
I would have voted for her speaker that first day. That first day, I would have voted for her for speaker. She's amazing. They're amazing. Those House clerks are amazing. I'll never forget, Steve, the first few days I was in Congress, I didn't know how to freaking vote. And I would miss a couple votes and I'd press the wrong button. And there were times where those clerks would just smile at me and they'd hold my hand and make sure I got my vote properly recorded. They are stalwarts of like patience in this zoo of, as you say, old high school people.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating thing to watch and to see, because if you ever flip through during the course of a normal week, not like we have those anymore, and you see Congress on C-SPAN, generally it's an empty room. You got 10, 15 people in there, and if you ever visited D.C. and you've been to the Capitol and you're not wearing horns and you went in legally, and you look down, it's very rare that you have even a larger crowd there. And did you go through that where occasionally you'd be speech making to an empty room?
A bunch. And actually that's one of the arguments, again, Matt Gaetz has made. One of the reasons that House members don't want to open up the C-SPAN cameras is because of that, Steve. They don't want the American people to see that most every day that floor is empty. And it shouldn't be.
How often do you have to be in chamber to vote? Is there a certain...
So when you're in session,
okay,
and say you're in session 2 to 3 weeks out of them every month, you are probably on the floor voting for a period every day. So when I'm in Washington, D.C., I'm probably on the floor on average 2 to 3 hours a day. Some days it could be 6 to 8 hours. But at least once a day, you're on the floor debating. Oh, we're all on the floor voting, debating and voting.
Do you know what your vote is before you go in and hear anything anybody said?
Generally, yes. By the way, which is a big part of the problem, because you know what your vote is as you're walking over to the floor to vote, because there's no, we did this under Pelosi, we did this under Boehner, we're going to do it. We did it, we may still do it under McCarthy. There's no open debate. There's no ability to offer amendments to bills. The decision has been made by the time that big, ugly omnibus gets to the floor to be voted on.
Well, look, I think, we agree on a lot of things, a lot more than you think we agree on. But I can tell you right now, the one thing
you're wrong on guns. You're way wrong on guns. But we'll get into that later.
The one thing, I believe in the Second Amendment. I just believe, much like you at a bar, at some point we have to be cut off, and 500 million guns is enough.
Look at you straddling the fence again. I love it when Cochran straddles.
Straddling the fence. Yeah, listen, it's just much more dangerous in your position. I can hurt myself in a sensitive area. But here's the deal. Chuck Schumer and Kevin McCarthy. I know he just got there. He's going to be there for 2 years in all likelihood. Well, maybe not. But Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, and
Hakeem Jeffries.
We don't know Hakeem Jeffries well enough to know whether he's going to be any good at it, but previously Pelosi. That whole body of those four had to go. We only removed one of them. The Congress itself has never been older. The Senate, I believe the average age in the Senate is Yoda. I think they're about 1,000. Is that damaging, or is that okay?
I think it's hugely damaging. The second bill I introduced in Congress a million years ago was a term limits bill, and I couldn't get anybody to really co-sponsor it with me. People just stay there too damn long, Steve, and every study that's ever been done by anybody on this issue shows the longer you're in Washington, the more likely you are to just grow government, and the more out of touch you become to your constituents, and the more likely you are to engage in corruption. There's just no reason that Chuck Grassley, 89-year-old Chuck Grassley, just got elected to another 6-year term.
Yeah, how does that serve the people of Iowa?
Dianne Feinstein, Steve, she's not even all there. 88-year-old Dianne,
nope.
She's not all there.
And hasn't been.
No.
Yeah, it's just...
Now Bernie's 81. He's like the Energizer Bunny, so maybe it's not the number. It's never been the age to me necessarily. It's how long you've been there.
Yeah, I agree.
You shouldn't be a career legislator, no matter how old you are.
Yeah, and keep in mind, for everybody that wants to lean on the Constitution, well, the founders wrote this. Well, guess what? When the founders wrote that, everybody lived to be 40 or 45. Yes. You weren't expected to still be in the gig then. You weren't expected to actually not need a powdered wig because your hair had turned to that. So, all right, I'm going to get you out of here, I promise. But a couple of people I want to ask you about, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. What happens to them now?
They are going to realize in very short order what I realized 3 years ago. There's no room in this Republican Party for them. Liz Cheney's a big enough name, Steve. She can do whatever the hell she wants. She can write her ticket, but she's no longer electable in the party. Adam Kinzinger, I don't know. He's not a Liz Cheney, so I don't know what he's going to do.
I will say this. They were part of a committee that I believe was not only 100% legitimate, should have been backed by both parties.
Yep.
But having said that, the Democrats who led that committee absolutely blew it. The idea that they spent all this time, all this money, and 1,000 witnesses and put a report out, a document out in the week between Christmas and New Year's, it just completely negated the entire thing. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. And I actually saw somebody arguing, and it may have been Kinzinger, arguing that historians now have a document that reflects. I don't give a shit about historians 100 years from now. I care about now.
I so love what you just said, Steve. And my biggest beef these last 2 years has always been, and you may disagree with me, I do believe it was an insurrection. I believe January 6th, it was a violent attempt to overthrow an American election. there should have been a January 6th committee the next day,
right,
formed the next week, investigating people a week and a half later. But it took so fucking, and I know the Republicans didn't want to cooperate, but it took so long for this. It was a state of emergency, and it took so long for this committee to finally do something.
Well, the fact is, Trump should have been impeached on January 7th. There should have been an immediate emergency session to move for impeachment then and let the investigation follow that. You know, you could even back this up to the DOJ now and the Attorney General now and Merrick Garland now. And how much more do you need to move forward on Donald Trump? And you could talk all day about, I don't know, we don't want to be a banana republic. We don't want to be putting ex-presidents in jail. Then what does a rule of law mean if he broke the law and you have it and he's not subjected to punishment for it?
Politics shouldn't impact the Justice Department's decision either way. So you shouldn't indict Trump because he's Trump, but you shouldn't not indict him because he's Trump.
Yeah, well said. Well said. All right, bonus Joe time now. And look, the one thing that you and I think agree on more than anything else is neither one of us want to go to meetings we don't have to go to. Neither one of us want to take phone calls we don't want to take. So I don't want to get you into a position where you have to do that. But to go back to the premise of Congress's high school for older people, all the cliques that we saw in high school, the names and things have changed, but the categories basically stay the same. Is there a central bully in Congress now who can sway votes just on the fact that they're a bully? And feel free to name names if you want.
I think the classic bully on the Republican side, and I give her a lot of credit, is Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I'll pick a female bully. And I think she's really underrated, Steve. She's not, and I'll make a distinction. Lauren Boebert is not a bully because she's just an idiot. And she can't influence anybody's vote. I guarantee you, because I know this for a fact, Marjorie Taylor Greene is smart. And she does influence a lot of Republican votes through her bullying, much more than people realize.
Street smart. She's not intellectually smart. She's street smart.
I might push you. Oh, no, I don't want to say it. I think she'd surprise you a little bit, Cochran. I really do.
Yeah, I don't see her doing the show anytime soon. Is there, as there was in high school, is there a central gossip? Is there somebody that just loves the gossip on the floor in the House or the Senate?
Yeah, you know, the funny thing, Steve, is he's now the speaker. McCarthy was always that. He'd always been that. Steve McCarthy's, you and I knew guys like this. He's the kind of guy in high school who he slapped everybody's back. Everybody who came into the cafeteria, he was slapping your back. He's sitting down with you, telling you, did you hear about what Steve said? Did you hear about who Jimmy's going out with Friday night? He knew everybody. He knew everybody's personal lives. That's so McCarthy.
That is so great.
Kevin McCarthy knows the makeup of every member's congressional district better than each member does. He's just that dude who knows everything about everybody.
And, of course, he could use it, you know, at some point if he needs it. So maybe that's part of the collecting of data. What about the slackers? What about the people who are just going, I don't know about this one. What are you going to vote for? Is there some of that goes on?
Oh, it's funny. Yeah, I'd say it's part of like the libertarian, the Tea Party guys. There are still a few of them there like that who have kind of checked out. They're part of like, they've not very enthusiastically signed on to the whole Marjorie Taylor Greene mega part of the party, but they're not really into it. They're like what I would be, but I wouldn't have signed on, like old Tea Party hippies who are just still in the game, but they really no longer care. So
they don't listen to their aides. They don't look at briefing books or reports. They just go, hey, Joe, what are you voting for? Maybe I'll do that.
It was kind of like how when I was there 10 years ago, old man Ron Paul had some of that in it.
Yeah. And one more, the Glory Days guys, and this is more men than women, obviously, just based on history, but the jocks who just can't wait to talk about their stories of what they did. So who talks mostly about themselves and who just wants to tell you about high school football?
Oh God, Steve, that's most of, and I can't think of specific names, but that's most of a lot of these young Republican men who
really,
and they're and they're mega men. They're mega men. They're big Trump supporters who've gotten elected since Trump became president. These are not the brightest bulbs. They were like the linebackers on the high school football team. They're from Tennessee and Alabama, and they're in their 30s now in Congress. A bunch of these young guys. There's a lot of that with them, but they're total Trumpers. There's not a lot of substance there.
The marching orders for you, the listener, is you must stay involved. You must move forward and start in your own community with your school boards, with your local police and fire. Run for office if you truly believe, and try to make your community better and move it out from there, because that's how we change things in a larger way.
Can I say one other thing that they must do?
Of course.
And I'm not just stroking you, but I'm going to stroke you. They need to listen to all different kinds of media.
Yep.
And if they're going to listen to radio, they need to listen to people like you, who present all sides. It's the only way you get smarter.
Oh, I appreciate that. I don't know that there is anybody else doing what I'm doing. Because everybody's picked a team. All right, now let's talk about you before we wrap this up. Podcast. You got 2, 3, 5 of these? How many podcasts are you doing?
No, just one. The White Flag with Joe Walsh. I think I'm going to expand it to daily here pretty quick. But no, it's me. I'm like you. I don't have a team, and so I'm trying to present a voice every day from a guy who's not on a team. The
White Flag's available everywhere, right? Anywhere I get my podcast?
Yes. Anywhere. Follow me on Twitter at Walsh Freedom as well.
And I know you're working on a couple other ideas and things.
Yes.
But you're on CNN and MSNBC all the time. And unlike these paid contributors, you weren't smart enough to take their money. You're doing it for free.
Doing it for free. Yes.
It's a pleasure.
Hey, thank you, my friend.
It's a pleasure, my friend. I appreciate you taking the extra time. It's Joe Walsh, and this is Live from my office. That's it for this edition of Live from my office. Don't forget, midweek we also give you highlights from the radio show. Stuff you may have missed because, A, you missed the radio show, it's on too early, or you wouldn't be caught dead listening to me on the radio, or you don't know what radio is, whatever the case may be. Or maybe you're a regular listener and you just missed some stuff. We give you great highlights from the radio show in snack-sized form midweek in our second podcast of the week on Live from my office. And for those of you who are nice enough to ask, the great Patty Steele and I will be back with an all-new podcast in that deep 6 slot that we were doing. That's coming soon as well. We'll give you details when we get a little further down the road on that. Miranda does a wonderful job of producing video and audio and taking care of me on the radio, and she is sitting in for Ross to produce this episode and this week's episodes of Live from my office. Thank you, Miranda. And yeah, no last name. She's too important to have a last name. In the meantime, my name is Steve Cochran. I thank you for listening. Again, subscribe, rate, and review, and listen to the radio show as well. CochranShow.com has every episode we've ever done of this, and we'll be back again next time on Live from my office.